A town where nothing ever rushed. In a small, peaceful American town, where the loudest sound was the distant hum of a refrigerator, life moved slower than the drifting clouds above. People walked without hurry, conversations stretched gently, and days felt like long, warm sighs. The town wasn't famous for anything. No landmarks, no mysteries, no special events. And yet, in this quiet place, emotions settled softly, like dust on an old wooden shelf. Nothing dramatic ever happened, but somehow the calmness carried a sadness that people didn't talk about. They simply let it rest in the silence. In a small, peaceful American town nestled between gentle hills and winding rivers, life moved slower than the drifting clouds above. The town had no name that appeared on maps with fanfare, no famous landmarks, no sprawling industries, and no tourist attractions that drew crowds. Its streets were lined with old maple trees, whose leaves whispered softly in the wind, and the sidewalks were cracked in gentle patterns that seemed to have grown in tandem with the people who walked upon them. Every morning, the sun spilled its pale gold over the rooftops and awoke a world that felt both familiar and untouched. People moved at their own pace, rarely hurrying. The mail carrier, a woman named Margaret, always lingered a little at each doorstep, waving to neighbors and chatting softly about the weather. The children walking to school would sometimes stop to pick up fallen leaves or examine insects that crawled across the pavement, unhurried and mesmerized by the smallest details. Conversations stretched gently in the cafes and diners, flowing slowly like warm syrup. No one raised their voice in anger, and no one rushed to finish their words. Arguments were rare, and if they ever surfaced, they were whispered away like fog in the morning, dissolving before they could take hold. The town's main street had a single grocery store, a small diner, a bookstore with fading letters on its wooden sign, and a post office whose bell above the door jingled softly whenever someone entered. Every morning, the bell rang in steady rhythm, as though to announce the slow heartbeat of the town itself. The grocery store owner, Mr. Thompson, moved with deliberate care while arranging his produce. Each apple was turned to face the customer, each loaf of bread aligned perfectly on the shelf. Even when a customer appeared in a rush, Mr. Thompson would meet them with a gentle smile and a patient nod, as though time itself could not be hurried here. In the evening, the town seemed to exhale. Street lights flickered on one by one, casting long, quiet shadows across the streets. The soft hum of refrigerators and air conditioners drifted from the houses like the low, steady hum of an unseen lullaby. Families would gather around their dinner tables, speaking in voices that barely rose above the hum of the evening. There were no grand events or performances, no sudden fireworks or celebrations, just the calm, ordinary passage of another day. And yet, there was a profound comfort in this monotony. Life's small details were appreciated, not ignored. A neighbor's smile, the slow turning of a ceiling fan, the smell of freshly baked bread, all of it mattered in ways that didn't demand urgency or recognition. In this town lived Eleanor, a woman in her late 50s who had never left. She had moved here as a child, and each familiar street corner held a memory like a photograph pressed between the pages of a book. Eleanor spent her days tending to her small garden at the back of her house, pruning rose bushes, watering tomato plants, and collecting pebbles along the garden path. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, every knot in the maple trees, every rustle of the wind in the branches, as if the town had whispered its secrets to her alone. Her neighbors often stopped to chat, and she would nod and smile, returning their greetings with a quiet warmth that reflected the town itself. On some mornings, Eleanor would sit on her porch, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, watching the mist rise from the river. She never felt the need to rush, to seek adventure or excitement, for her contentment lay in observing the simple rhythms of life. The ducks gliding across the water, the way sunlight struck the leaves at a certain hour, the slow crawl of clouds across a pastel sky. These were her companions. She would sometimes hum to herself, a soft tune that had no beginning and no end, echoing the town's gentle heartbeat. Yet beneath the calm, there was a subtle sadness that lingered like the aftertaste of rain. The town had a way of holding emotions quietly, folding them into the corners of streets and houses, leaving them to settle like dust on an old wooden shelf. People didn't often speak of loss or longing, but those feelings existed, invisible yet palpable. Children who grew up here learned early that emotions didn't need to be shouted or displayed. They simply lived quietly in the spaces between one day and the next. And in that quiet, there was both comfort and a strange ache, a reminder that life, though gentle, also carried the weight of what might never happen, of dreams quietly set aside. One afternoon, a boy named Liam wandered down the old cobblestone path behind the bookstore. He carried a notebook, not for school assignments, but for the small observations he loved to record. He noted the way sunlight filtered through the maple leaves, how a breeze could make the ripples in the river dance like tiny diamonds, and how the bakery's bell chimed differently depending on the wind. He was a boy who noticed everything, yet expected nothing. When he returned home, he would read his notes aloud to his mother, who smiled quietly, sipping her tea, and said, "The world moves at its own pace, and that's enough." Evenings were Eleanor's favorite. She would sit by her window, a soft shawl around her shoulders, and watch as lamps flickered on in neighboring houses. Occasionally, she would catch sight of someone walking slowly down the street, head tilted slightly, perhaps talking to themselves or simply listening to the rhythm of their own heartbeat. There was a soothing consistency to the way the town lived. Every light, every footstep, every whisper of the wind contributed to the slow symphony of life here. The town did not seek attention, and it did not demand admiration. It simply existed, quietly, patiently, and with grace. One night, Eleanor walked to the riverbank, drawn by the pull of moonlight on water. The river reflected the stars, still and clear, as though it too had paused in reverence to the town's quietness. She inhaled the cool night air, felt the soft dampness of the grass under her bare feet, and let herself sink into the calm. She thought about neighbors who had passed, friends who had moved away, and the countless small forgotten moments that made up her life. Each memory shimmered faintly, like light on water, and Eleanor realized that the beauty of her town was not in excitement or grandeur, but in its unwavering patience and the gentle persistence of ordinary days. Time passed almost imperceptibly. The seasons changed with quiet dignity. Spring brought soft green buds and the occasional song of a bird. Summer stretched lazily over fields of wheat and dandelions. Autumn arrived with leaves turning gold and crimson, carpeting streets in a slow, colorful hush. Winter followed, blanketing the town in silence, muffling even the usual hums and whispers. Yet no matter the season, the town remained constant. Life continued without rush or drama, and people found comfort in the subtle continuity. Eleanor often reflected that, in a world outside this town, things might move too fast. People racing for wealth, recognition, adventure, or distraction. But here in this town, there was a rare and unspoken wisdom that happiness could be found in the absence of urgency, that sorrow could exist without demand, and that every breath, every glance, every ordinary moment. There lived a middle-aged man named Walter, who kept a small notebook filled with the simplest observations. He wrote down how many minutes the coffee machine took to brew, how long birds sat on the fence, and how often the streetlight flickered at night. He had no adventures to record, only small, quiet details that didn't matter to anyone else. But to Walter, these tiny moments felt like companions. He often sat by the window and watched the same car drive by every morning at 8:12 a.m. It comforted him. It made him feel like time was gently holding his hand instead of rushing past him. Walter was a middle-aged man who had learned the quiet rhythm of his life so thoroughly that it almost seemed to belong to him alone. He lived in a modest house at the corner of Elm Street, a home that was more familiar than any person he had ever met. Its walls had absorbed decades of soft sunlight and faint creaks from the floorboards, a kind of language that spoke in whispers to anyone who paid attention. Walter did pay attention, always. He had a small leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges and yellowed by time, in which he meticulously recorded the smallest details of his days. Every morning, he noted the exact minute his coffee machine finished brewing. Some people might consider it trivial, perhaps even pointless, but to Walter, it was a ritual. The way the machine hissed, the delicate aroma of roasted beans rising in gentle waves, and the soft drip that echoed in the quiet kitchen all mattered. In his notebook, he wrote, "Coffee finished at 7:43 a.m. Steam warm, aroma steady, heart calm." It was a simple sentence, but it captured the fullness of a moment. To Walter, moments like this were treasures, small islands of stability in a world that seemed intent on rushing past him. After his coffee, Walter would sit by the living room window and watch the world outside. Across the street, an old maple tree had grown in the same spot for decades. Its branches swayed lazily in the morning breeze, casting dappled shadows across the cracked pavement. Walter observed the birds that perched there, sparrows mostly, sometimes a blue jay or a robin. He noted how long each stayed, how they preened their feathers, the tiny jerks of their heads as they scanned the air for movement. Each day, the birds became his silent companions. He wrote, "2 sparrows on the east branch, preening 3 minutes 22 seconds. 1 flew south, 1 remained." Walter's life was filled with these small, repetitive observations. He measured the flicker of the streetlight across the road, noting the faint stutter when the wind shook its aged post. He watched a mail carrier deliver letters every morning at exactly 9:05 a.m., sometimes pausing to straighten her hat or adjust her gloves. He recorded the exact second a passing car's headlights hit his living room window. At 8:12 a.m. every day, the same red sedan drove past his house, and Walter would smile quietly to himself, as though the car and its driver were a reassurance that the world was still moving predictably. He was not lonely, though some might have thought so. Walter found companionship in details that others overlooked. A leaf drifting down the street, a breeze brushing against the curtains, the subtle warmth of sunlight on his hands. All of it mattered. Life did not need to be dramatic, he believed, for small, ordinary things could bring profound contentment if observed closely. He often thought of his notebook as a friend, a living archive of quiet happiness, each entry a testament to his attentiveness and care. Walter's evenings were equally unremarkable, but deeply satisfying. He would sit in his favorite armchair, a faded green recliner that had molded perfectly to his shape over years of use. The television often remained off, for he preferred the gentle hum of his refrigerator and the occasional whisper of the wind through the half-open window. Sometimes he listened to the low murmur of a distant train, a sound that traveled through the town with deliberate slowness, and he would write, "Train distant, hum steady, memory of youth flickers gently." Dinner was quiet, usually a simple meal of vegetables, rice or pasta. He often ate alone, though occasionally a neighbor or distant cousin would drop by, offering a brief exchange of words that mattered more for their warmth than for their content. Walter relished the calm of these moments, never feeling the need to fill silence with meaningless chatter. Silence to him was a companion, a space in which the ordinary could be appreciated fully. On some nights, Walter walked through his small garden. It was an unremarkable patch of land, modest in size, with tomatoes, a few sunflowers, and a patch of lavender along the edge. He would kneel on the soft earth, feeling the cool soil through his fingers, and inspect each plant carefully. Every leaf, every blossom, every crooked stem received attention and care. He recorded in his notebook, "Lavender buds unopened, soil moist, evening wind soft, heart steady." Each of these observations reminded him of the subtle beauty in life, the unchanging rhythm of existence. Sometimes he would watch the neighbors' houses from his window, noting the faint lights and shadows. He did not spy on them in any sinister way. He merely appreciated the quiet movements that marked the passage of ordinary lives. A neighbor watering plants, a dog wagging its tail, a cat slinking along a fence. All of these were pieces of a daily mosaic that Walter documented and treasured. He often imagined that, somewhere, other people might find similar satisfaction in their routines, though he rarely spoke of it. As months passed, Walter noticed patterns he had never seen before. Certain birds always perched at the same spot on the fence at the same time. Streetlights flickered on in exact sequences. The wind whispered in familiar tones through the maple branches, and the sun fell across his window in repeating patterns. To some, these might have seemed like inconsequential details, but to Walter, they formed the gentle poetry of his life. He wrote, "Life repeats quietly, beauty unnoticed, heart listens." Sometimes he reflected on the moments that he had lost, the minor regrets that never demanded loud confession. A conversation left unfinished with a friend who had moved away, a book never read, a recipe never tried. These were not tragedies. They were gentle reminders that life is fragile in its simplicity, and the smallest moments deserve acknowledgement before they vanish. He often smiled at these thoughts, finding comfort in their ordinariness. Walter's evenings often ended the same way. He would close his notebook,
place it carefully on the side table, and sit in the armchair as dusk turned the sky soft gray. The room was filled with shadows, stretching slowly across the walls. He would sip his tea, feel the warmth seep into his hands, and listen to the world outside. A dog barking far away, the occasional car passing by, the rustle of wind through the trees. Each sound was deliberate and soothing, like a lullaby composed by life itself. The quietness of the town, the slow passing of each day, and the meticulous recording of these ordinary moments gave Walter a profound sense of peace. He knew that life might appear uneventful to outsiders, but to him it was rich, layered, and deeply meaningful. He had discovered a secret that others might never see, that happiness does not always roar or demand attention, but sometimes hums quietly between the lines of ordinary days. On particularly calm nights, Walter would lie in bed and think of the town's rhythm, of the repeated dance of the clouds, the steady flicker of the streetlight, and the familiar passing of the red sedan at 8:12 a.m. These thoughts lulled him into a state of quiet contentment, allowing sleep to arrive slowly and gently, without urgency or worry. He sometimes wondered what life might be like elsewhere, in towns full of noise, haste, and ceaseless activity. Yet the thought never unsettled him. The world outside could move as fast as it liked. Walter's town had chosen its own pace, and he had chosen to notice, record.
Every night, Walter remembered things he thought he had forgotten, soft memories that returned without urgency. He remembered his mother humming while folding laundry, the late-night grocery aisles he walked through in his 20s, and a friend he once lost touch with but never stopped thinking about. These memories didn't hurt. They simply floated around him, filling the room with a quiet ache. They were neither happy nor sad, just gentle reminders that a life can be full, even when nothing extraordinary happens. He would lie in bed listening to the soft buzz of the air conditioner, letting the past drift in and out like a slow-moving tide. Every evening, as the sun began to settle behind the distant hills, Walter felt the gentle pull of memory, like the quiet tide of a river returning to shore. He sat in his armchair by the window, the familiar creak of his cushions greeting him as he lowered himself into its embrace. The house was quiet, illuminated only by the soft amber glow of a table lamp and the faint flicker of streetlights beyond the curtains. Outside, the wind whispered through the maple trees lining the street, carrying the delicate scent of late summer blooms. It was in these calm, ordinary evenings that memories arrived, not abruptly nor with any urgency, but like slow-moving fog drifting into a familiar valley, filling the corners of his mind with shapes long forgotten yet deeply known. The first memory, as it always did, was of his mother. She hummed while folding laundry in the kitchen, a soft, steady tune that seemed to resonate with the rhythm of the house itself. Walter could see her movements, precise and measured, each sock folded over another, each shirt smoothed with care. The memory was not sharp or bright like a photograph. It was gentle, like light reflected off water at dusk. He could hear the faint rustle of fabric, smell the faint warmth of sun-warmed cotton, and feel the safety that had always accompanied her presence. Even though she had been gone for many years, her humming returned to him each evening, comforting and melancholic at the same time. Another memory followed, sliding slowly into place like a leaf carried by a calm stream. Walter remembered the late-night grocery aisles he wandered through in his 20s. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting pale rectangles on the polished linoleum floors. He had walked those aisles alone, sometimes choosing ingredients for a meal he never made, sometimes just observing the quiet order of cans stacked in neat rows. He remembered the smell of freshly baked bread from the small bakery section, the faint tang of cleaning chemicals that lingered long after the store had been scrubbed, and the distant murmur of the cashier's voice as they totaled a customer's bill. These memories had no drama, no excitement, yet they floated back to him with a strange sweetness, a reminder of a life that had been unremarkable yet fully lived. Walter often thought about the friend he once lost touch with, his college companion James, who had moved across the country and vanished slowly from the routine of his life. They had spent hours discussing books, sharing jokes, and walking along quiet streets under dim streetlights, each conversation meandering like a lazy river. Though decades had passed, Walter still remembered James's laughter, low and warm, and the way his eyes crinkled at the corners whenever he smiled. These memories returned without fanfare or longing. They simply appeared, a gentle presence in the quiet of the evening. They did not hurt, they did not ache sharply. Instead, they created a soft resonance, a quiet echo that filled the room and reminded Walter that even fleeting moments could leave lasting imprints on the soul. Sometimes memories would arrive as scents rather than images. The faint aroma of his grandmother's apple pie, baked every Sunday afternoon, would drift into his awareness, carrying with it the sound of her humming in the kitchen and the feel of warm, flour-dusted hands pressing dough. Walter would call the way the windows fogged over in winter, the way sunlight reflected off the frost, and the way the smell of cinnamon mingled with the cold air drifting through the slightly ajar window. He would close his eyes and let these memories envelop him, breathing slowly, feeling the slow pulse of life in each small recollection. Other memories were quieter still, arriving as tactile impressions rather than sights or sounds. He remembered the smoothness of a polished railing he had held while walking through a public library in his youth, the firmness of a wooden bench he had leaned against while waiting for a late-night train, the softness of his old dog's fur as it pressed against his leg during late summer afternoons. Each memory was mundane, ordinary in every way, yet the accumulation of these moments created a tapestry of life that was comforting and profound. They reminded him that meaning does not always arrive in grand gestures or extraordinary events. It often exists quietly in small, repeated experiences that are easy to overlook. Even the sounds of the present were intertwined with these memories. Walter listened to the soft buzz of the air conditioner, the distant hum of passing cars, the occasional bark of a dog far down the street, and the rustle of leaves against the window pane. Each sound seemed to echo fragments of the past, a hum reminiscent of a friend's voice, a car engine like the one James drove in his youth, the whispering wind like the gentle breeze on summer nights long ago. These ordinary sounds became a canvas on which memories could paint themselves slowly, deliberately, and without interruption. Walter often reflected that the quietness of the house itself contributed to the gentle return of memories. The soft ticking of the old wall clock, the faint groan of floorboards as they expanded and contracted with the evening chill, the slow, deliberate drip of the faucet in the kitchen, each sound carried him back to moments that had been long buried under the weight of daily life. He did not rush to remember them. There was no urgency, no pressure to relive them fully or analyze their meaning. They simply arrived, like old friends walking through a familiar door, and he welcomed them quietly. On nights when the fog of memory was especially thick, Walter found himself drifting in and out of recollection, each memory dissolving into another without clear boundaries. He would see his childhood bedroom, the worn carpet beneath his bed, the faint glow of a nightlight in the corner. Then he would be back in the grocery store, or watching his mother fold laundry, or walking with James through the quiet streets of their youth. It was a slow, dreamlike procession, neither linear nor urgent, but deeply satisfying in its rhythm. Walter never tried to hold on to these memories too tightly. He understood their impermanence, their gentle passage. Some faded as soon as they arrived. Others lingered longer, settling in his consciousness like soft, persistent fog that refused to dissipate quickly. And that was enough. There was no need for analysis, no need for judgment or evaluation. Memories were companions, floating alongside him in the quiet evening hours, reminding him of the depth and texture of a life lived fully, even in its most ordinary moments. He often imagined that the past and the present were intertwined in a quiet dance. The moments he had lived and forgotten returned not to disrupt his current reality, but to enhance it, adding layers of depth and resonance. He would lie in bed listening to the air conditioner, feeling the soft weight of blankets against him, and let the memories flow in and out like a slow-moving tide. The experience was neither joyful nor sorrowful. It was contemplative, reflective, and deeply comforting. Even the mundane events of the day seemed to take on new significance when viewed through the lens of memory. Walter would remember the way a neighbor waved across the street, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the block, the distant laughter of children playing in the park. Each memory, though small, became a thread in the larger tapestry of his existence, a reminder that even the quietest, most unremarkable life contained moments worthy of attention. As the night deepened, the fog of memory would gradually thin, leaving Walter with a calm, meditative awareness. He would close his eyes, feeling the subtle rhythm of his heartbeat, the gentle rise and fall of his chest, and the slow, steady hum of the world outside. Memories had come and gone, soft as a whisper, yet they left him with a sense of fullness, as though the small, ordinary experiences of a lifetime had combined into something quietly magnificent. In those quiet hours, Walter understood that life does not always demand extraordinary events to be meaningful. A hum, a scent, a fleeting image from the past, all could carry weight if observed and cherished. The return of memories like soft evening fog reminded him that life, even in its most unassuming form, was rich, layered, and deeply resonant. And as he drifted into sleep, he carried these memories with him, letting them mingle with dreams, creating a calm, enduring sense of continuity between past and present. Walter's nights were never rushed, never urgent, never filled with the need for action or achievement. They were simply hours in which the mind could wander gently through the landscape of memory, revisiting old friends, soft images, and ordinary joys. And in this gentle wandering, he discovered the profound comfort of simply being alive, fully present in each moment, and fully aware of the subtle, enduring beauty that surrounded him. In those quiet hours, Walter lay in bed, letting the memories drift slowly like fog across a calm valley, enveloping him in warmth, peace, and the quiet knowledge that a life can be full, even when nothing extraordinary ever happens.
On a particularly calm night, the world outside Walter's window seemed to pause. The street was empty, The house is dark and the air still. He felt no excitement, no fear, no urgent thoughts, just a deep, peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a warm blanket for a tired heart. Walter realized that life didn't always need purpose or direction. Sometimes all a person needs is a moment where nothing is expected of them. So he closed his notebook, turned off the light, and let himself drift slowly into sleep, held gently by a night that asked for nothing at all. It was one of those rare nights when the world seemed to exhale, releasing every hurried thought and anxious heartbeat in a collective sigh. Walter sat by the window in his small living room, the soft glow of the lamp spilling onto the worn carpet, casting familiar shadows that stretched lazily across the walls. Outside, the street was empty. The houses, lined neatly along Elm Street, were dark and silent, as if the world itself had decided to pause for a moment. The air was perfectly still, carrying neither wind nor whisper, only the faint scent of late summer earth drifting through the slightly open window. Walter's notebook, his constant companion, rested unopened on the desk beside him. Tonight, he felt no urge to write. There was nothing pressing, nothing urgent to record. The ordinary rhythm of his days, usually so meticulously noted, the flicker of streetlights, the hum of the refrigerator, the passage of the red sedan at 8:12 a.m., felt irrelevant in the deep, perfect calm of this night. For the first time in a long time, the notebook could wait. He watched the quiet street as shadows stretched from lampposts onto cracked pavement. The occasional chirp of a cricket broke the silence, subtle and rhythmic, blending with the faint hum of the air conditioner. Walter didn't need to measure, count, or observe. He simply sat and let the night envelop him. The feeling was unusual, not loneliness, not boredom, but an almost sacred emptiness, a space where nothing was demanded and nothing was expected. It was a quiet so profound that it felt like a warm blanket wrapping around the edges of his heart. The familiar details of his home, the worn cushions of his armchair, the creak of the floorboards, the soft folds of the curtains, seemed to breathe with him. Each object carried a quiet resonance, a subtle testimony to countless ordinary nights like this one. Walter allowed himself to notice, without judgment, without any compulsion to record or categorize. The rhythm of life was soft and unbroken, and for once he was content to simply exist within it. He thought of the months and years that had passed, of mornings spent noting the coffee's aroma, afternoons watching birds settle on the maple tree, evenings filled with memories drifting like fog. Those moments had all been meaningful in their own quiet way, but tonight, even they felt unnecessary. Tonight, life asked nothing of him. It required no action, no reflection, no ambition. All it asked was presence, and Walter found a profound peace in simply existing within it. Through the window, the night seemed to stretch endlessly. He could see the subtle outlines of trees, their branches unmoving, their leaves settled in perfect stillness. The streetlights glimmered faintly, their glow steady and unhurried. Occasionally, the shadow of a passing cloud would drift across the sky, darkening the ground momentarily before passing on. Even the occasional distant sound, a dog barking, the faint rumble of a car far away, was absorbed into the silence, neither intrusive nor jarring. Everything belonged to the moment, and nothing demanded interpretation. Walter leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a few minutes, listening to the night. He could feel the rise and fall of his chest, the slow beating of his heart, the faint pulse in his fingers resting on the arm of the chair. It was an awareness that required no effort, no attention to detail. It simply existed, as the night existed, as he existed. The quiet was not lonely. It was a presence, a companion that needed nothing and gave everything. He remembered that nights like this were rare. Most evenings carried the residue of uncompleted tasks, worries about the next day, or the subtle ache of unresolved thoughts. But tonight, all of that had melted away. The world had paused, and Walter was allowed to pause with it. He could feel the tension in his shoulders slowly dissolving, the faint knot in his chest loosening. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he didn't need to measure, to write, or to remember. He simply existed in the gentle, unbroken calm of the night. The subtle scent of lavender from a small pot on his windowsill mingled with the cool evening air. Walter inhaled deeply, savoring the simplicity of the moment. It reminded him of long-ago summer nights, when the world had felt equally expansive and unhurried, when sleep arrived easily and dreams drifted like clouds across a limitless sky. That memory came without urgency, settling softly in his mind as a reminder that stillness could be a gift, a rare treasure that didn't need to be justified or explained. Walter thought about the lives of others in the neighborhood. The houses, dark and silent, each held its own stories, its own quiet moments. Perhaps someone else was reading in bed, someone else was staring out the window, someone else was letting the day's anxieties fade into the calm of night. He didn't know them, and yet he felt connected to them in the shared stillness. The night asked nothing, demanded nothing, yet offered a subtle bond between all those who chose to simply exist within it. He shifted slightly in the chair, feeling the familiar weight of the cushions beneath him. Each creak of the armchair, each small sound from the house, became part of the night's quiet symphony. There was a rhythm here, slow and deliberate, that needed no commentary. Walter understood that sometimes the most profound experiences were not loud or extraordinary, but subtle, patient, and unassuming.
The night had nothing to demand of him, and that absence of demand was its gift. Walter reached for the blanket draped over the back of the chair, letting it cover his legs. The soft fabric brought a small warmth, comforting in its simplicity. The air was cool but gentle, and the contrast between warmth and chill created a sensory awareness that grounded him fully in the present. He thought of nothing in particular, no tasks, no obligations, no concerns. The moment itself was enough. The night in its quiet perfection required only acceptance. Slowly, Walter rose and moved to his bed, feeling each step carefully, deliberately. The mattress welcomed him with a soft sigh. The pillows cradled his head, and the blanket settled over his chest. He reached for the notebook one last time, not to write, but to appreciate it silently. It had been a faithful companion through years of ordinary days, a vessel for small details and quiet reflections. Tonight, however, it would remain closed. The night asked nothing, and Walter, for the first time in a long while, was willing to ask nothing of himself. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the shadows of the window frame stretched lazily across it. The room was still, the house was still, and even his thoughts began to slow, drifting gently like the fog on a cool autumn morning. He could hear the distant hum of the air conditioner, the faint rustle of the leaves, the soft, steady beating of his own heart. Nothing moved too quickly, nothing intruded, and everything was exactly as it should be. Walter's mind floated freely, unanchored, not seeking, not questioning, simply observing. He felt a gentle gratitude for the night's generosity, for the absence of expectation, for the space to simply be. The world had paused for him, and he accepted it fully, allowing the calm to fill every corner of his being. Gradually, sleep began to pull at the edges of his consciousness. There was no resistance, no worry about tomorrow, no list of tasks pressing for completion. There was only the present, expansive and silent, holding him gently as he surrendered to its embrace. The quiet hours between heartbeats stretched infinitely, a sanctuary in which nothing was required, and yet everything was complete. Walter's final thought, as his eyes closed fully and the house slipped into complete stillness, was a soft acknowledgement of the night's gift. Life didn't always need purpose, it didn't always demand meaning or action. Sometimes all a person needs a moment where nothing was asked of them, where the world paused and they could simply breathe, simply exist, and simply be at peace. And with that understanding, Walter let go. The night, patient and unassuming, held him in its quiet embrace. Outside, the street remained empty, the houses dark, and the world still. Nothing moved, nothing demanded, and everything was as it should be. For the first time in a long while, Walter felt wholly, completely at rest, held gently by a night that asked for nothing at all.